This episode is brought to you by Portland Distro. If you love underground music and movies, go to portlanddistro.com for licensed shirts, vinyl, CDs, and more. Go to portlanddistro.com. Plug in the discount code MikeHill666 for 15% off at portlanddistro.com. Episode of the Everything Went Black podcast. Please welcome back Jacob Curwen of All Hell, a band that I'm a huge fan of. We've done some dates together several years ago, and hopefully we'll be doing more dates in the future. It was good to catch up with Jacob. We talk about a bunch of stuff, including our love for weird fiction and philosophies and things of that nature. Once you're done with this show, definitely head over to experience the awe and might of the horsemen of the podcasting apocalypse. Of course, I'm referring to my brethren, the elite, the podcasting Illuminati. We provide weekly, excellent podcasting content for all of you. Of course, I'm referring to Horror Wolf 666, brought to you by Brandon Legion, Into the Necrosphere, delivered weekly by Jackie Smith. There's Everything Went Black. I return with Necromaniacs, along with my co-hosts Mike Scandato and Jeff Kashid. We have Break the Apocalypse, which features Mike's brother, John Draper. Soul Knox, brought to you by Carl Hikara for all things bizarre, macabre, and esoteric. And please welcome newest member, Iblis Manifestations, brought to you by Cheyenne from the band Trivax. If you want to support Everything Went Black, please go to Patreon and join. For as little as $1 a month, you can get access to bonus content. For $5 a month, you get the bonus content plus early access to the shows. For $25 a month, you can be a sponsor. It gets you all of the other content on the other two tiers, plus you get a custom ad read if you're trying to promote a business, a band, any kind of project. And that will appear every month at the beginning of the episode. Follow us on all social media, and we'll see you out there. So how's things going, man? It's been a while.
Things have been pretty good for the most part. Nothing really to complain about. Put out that new EP. Been doing a few shows.
You guys just
doing
finished
stuff.
I'm sorry, what was that? Pardon me.
Just said, other than that, doing gym stuff and a little bit of artwork.
Did you say gym stuff, like training and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I saw a video on Instagram of you doing curls with like a barrier or something.
Yeah, I was goofing off backstage.
How much into training are you? What kind of stuff do you do?
Mostly like just weight training, bodybuilding type stuff. I used to do a little bit more in the powerlifting side of things, but kind of cooled down a little bit on that.
Wow. I mean, you're definitely a fit guy. I remember when we played those shows. I don't think you and I ever talked about that kind of stuff before. That's really cool.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm not really into like weightlifting so much, but
yeah.
You know, I mean,
you do some MMA type stuff, right?
Muay Thai, like primarily.
Gotcha.
I used to do a lot more of BJJ, and for like about a year I trained MMA, but
cool.
Too many variables, I think, with that kind of stuff, and
right.
I just kind of stick to the Thai boxing stuff these days.
Yeah, Actually, I was looking into getting into a martial art earlier this year and kind of decided on Muay Thai if I pursue it. So that's kind of funny.
Well, I can't say enough good things about it.
Right.
I mean, I like jujitsu. It's just that I don't love it. Like I trained it for a bunch of years. I used to wrestle when I was a kid, but
Right.
I've always been more into the striking sports and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So do you do anything
Definitely.
with like kettlebells or like powerlifting stuff? Or?
A little bit, mostly barbell stuff. Squats, deadlifts, shoulder presses, bench press, that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I do that 3 or 4 days a week, usually 3 if I'm being lazy.
3 if you're being lazy. That's like aside from training Muay Thai, like I try to get to the gym like maybe twice a day. I'm sorry, not twice a day, twice a week.
Right.
To do like just like deadlifts and kind of like my weightlifting thing is only about 40 minutes twice a week, and the rest is the rest is just like hitting pads and sparring and doing drills and stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's actually doing the strength training stuff has actually helped me not get injured, even though I just got over an injury recently.
Right.
I noticed that my joints and stuff feel a lot better by doing that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a whole plethora of mental health benefits and everything too. There's like more and more research comes out. It's like all that shit's really good for you.
Oh, totally. So these shows you guys just played, it was pretty cool little run of dates you had.
Yeah, it ended up just being a couple dates. It was actually kind of a last minute thing with our new booking agent, but he was able to get us on the last 2 dates of that Profinatica Panzerfaust tour. Both those shows were awesome for us. Like, great turnouts, made a lot of new fans. I think saw a lot of old fans as well, but a little bit different crowd.
Yeah, Profinatica are definitely pretty legendary band, and Panzerfaust are a band that I just started listening to like maybe 2 years ago, and those guys are great.
Yeah, they killed it for sure.
There's the lyrics in their songs. I mean, I don't know if you've gotten too deeply into their records, but that's like pretty well thought out material as far as like lyric writing and concept and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely always respect when people put thought into it.
So how long ago did the EP come out?
April, like mid-April.
Oh, so it's been out for a bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Is it the same lineup as you guys had before? Because I know there was like some drummer fill-in kind of stuff going on.
It's it's still me and the same bassist. We more or less had a studio drummer type situation for this EP, and we have a different drummer now. So.
And he did the shows you guys just played?
Yep. We got a little bit of a Spinal Tap situation going on with drummers, but hopefully this one sticks for a while.
What do you think it is about drummers, man? It's like, you know what I mean? Like I don't know how many drummers I've had in Tombs, man. It's like, I kind of lost track after a while,
Right. Yeah.
I don't know, man. I feel like, and even when you have like a solid drummer, it's like he's playing in like 5 other bands or something.
Yeah, exactly. Because he's reliable, and so everyone relies on him, and then it's just too much.
So where did you guys record the EP at?
We recorded with Chris Adams from Black Tusk, actually, who we made friends with him when we toured with them just prior to the pandemic, and ended up recording at his studio in Savannah. And that, it went really well. I feel like probably will work with him again in the future.
Do you enjoy recording? I mean, some people like it, some people don't. Some people prefer live. Like, what's your take on
that? I guess there's parts of it I enjoy and parts of it I don't. It's a little bit stressful just because, I'm handling all the guitar stuff and, multiple guitar tracks and leads, and then have to do all my vocal stuff. And so it just, adds up.
Do you guys do a lot of pre-production stuff too?
A little bit, probably not as much as we should.
I find the songwriting process, like that creation process, to be probably the most interesting over recording, maybe.
Yeah. I enjoy songwriting a lot too. But then at the same time, I feel like in the studio, like when the pressure's on, we usually can deliver, like it brings out the best in us more often than not.
How about like doing vocals? How excruciating is that?
I enjoy doing vocals.
Really?
I like recording the vocal stuff more than I enjoy recording guitar stuff.
I think that I find it easier to do vocals as far as execution goes than guitar.
Right.
'Cause, with the guitar playing, you're under a microscope and, every little thing is examined.
Yeah.
And
you got a little bit more room.
Yeah. With vocals, it's like, it's a little bit easier, but then again, like, it's so hard to be objective about your own voice,
Right. Yeah. It definitely helps to have people that you trust, because, if it's just me, every single take, I'll be like, that sucked.
Yeah. You always feel like you could do it a little bit better.
Yeah. And that's another time when it helps to have a good producer who knows what you're capable of and can kind of choose when to push you at the right times.
Now, this was the first time you worked with Chris, right?
Yeah.
Who'd you guys work with prior to this?
For the 3 full lengths we did with a guy named Chris Hilbert that had a studio called Legitimate Business in Greensboro, North Carolina. I think he is not doing that anymore, but yeah, he was also a good guy that knew when to push people and when to, back off a little bit. Yeah. I haven't really had a bad recording experience. I mean, like our very first like self-released album or whatever was kind of just like janky in a friend of a friend's basement, more or less. But other than that, we've worked with good people, I feel like.
Now, Legitimate Business in Greensboro, was that connected to some kind of venue or something like that?
It used to. I think they also used to host shows there.
I have to sit now. This is my memory is anyone out there is listening to this. It's like I know I've played there at least once, and then last year on the tour that we did with Cloak and Restless Spirit, we had a show get canceled, and we played in this like tiny DIY space that I recognized as being right down the street from Legitimate Business. Does that
right.
ring a bell with you at all?
It very well may be. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, it's funny. It was one of those scenarios where we pulled up and I was like, I know that I've been here before.
Yeah. Yeah, I never played or went to a show there, but I definitely have heard, stories from people who did. So it wouldn't surprise me if there was like a DIY spot nearby.
Is that band Young Brave from that area?
I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with them.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. It's like we're going back like probably like 10, 12 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of time has passed, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I'll refer to something and be like, oh, it was a couple of years ago. And then I think about it and it was 15 years ago or something. Pretty sure I'm getting old.
Time the Avenger. It's funny. The last time we spoke, we kind of touched on weird fiction and Lovecraft and all that sort of stuff. And I feel like subsequent to that, you and I have touched base more and more about weird fiction and cosmic horror and all that kind of stuff. And I realize that you and I share a lot of the same tastes as far as that sort of stuff goes.
Mm-hmm.
What was your introduction to that? Like, how did you like what was the first writer you got into? How did that happen?
I think Lovecraft was definitely the first writer I got into, probably my last year of high school. So this is, I don't know, a while back. We'll leave numbers out of it. But I just always like heard the name here and there. But this was kind of back before you could easily find Lovecraft at like Barnes and Noble or Books A Million or whatever. Like I definitely remember having to dig around to find anything. I think actually, like I had learned the name probably from seeing old VHS at the like video rental place. Like I would see, Reanimator, and it would mention H.P. Lovecraft, or there was that one Necronomicon movie or whatever that had his name on the front.
Right.
So I was like, oh, who's this guy? And then I look into it, and like, oh, Cthulhu, like that's like the Metallica song or whatever, and did a little bit of research and picked up on his stuff, and that was how I got into him.
That's interesting, man. So it was like the Stuart Gordon films that piqued your interest.
That's probably my first exposure to the name for sure. Yeah, which they're some of them are good movies. Not all of them are exactly representative of the actual fiction, but
I think they're good movies. They're enjoyable films. I think From Beyond is probably the most enjoyable, maybe for me personally. Even Dagon, I thought was pretty cool. Even though
that's a pretty good one.
The budget shows on that one for sure.
Yeah.
They couldn't get Jeffrey Combs to play, so they got a guy who kind of looks like him, I guess.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like the second string Jeffrey Combs,
right,
like his understudy to star in the film. But they're not really representative of the actual stories. So after watching those films and then reading the stories, like what was your first of all, Lovecraft's pretty dense to get into as a young kid. So how do you find all that stuff?
I mean, I guess it was kind of hard, but I was used to reading kind of difficult material, I guess, just because of my interests and education up to that point. But I mean, still kind of difficult to wade through as a teenager. But once I had made it through a few stories, it was like, oh, basically every story has something really awesome that happens at the end. So, they're all worth it. You just got to read to the end to get like the awesome ending or whatever. So I think that kind of, pushed me on.
What kind of stuff were you reading in addition to that? I mean, like Poe and that sort of stuff as well?
Yeah. As far as horror goes, mostly like Poe.
Like, what about other literature? I mean, were you sort of like an AP English literature guy in high school, like I was?
Right. So, sort of. I actually went to a Christian high school, and I don't know, like everyone I talked to that like transferred there from regular public school or whatever was just like, oh, this is so much harder. Like, so I guess that, just the stuff we were reading at on a regular basis was a little bit more advanced or whatever. So, I mean, it was probably like the equivalent of AP in public schools.
That's really interesting about that, because I grew up with a Catholic light, let's say. Like my family identified as Catholics, and the part of New York State that I grew up in was mostly Irish and Italian, and that Roman Catholic vibe.
Yeah.
my grandmother was like my extended family was like a very big part of my life. So there was this like heavy like immigrant Catholic trip
Yeah.
going on as I was growing up. So that imagery and that kind of like foreboding, suffering vibe of the Catholic Church, was very, very intense. I mean, I went to a public school, but a lot of people I was friends with went to a Catholic school. Now, was yours like what brand of Christianity are we talking about?
It was a Baptist school, actually. So pretty hardcore.
Yeah. It's interesting because, back in Europe, the Roman Catholic Church, as you know, were persecuting Protestants, and a lot of that stuff is chronicled, pretty heavily. And it can be said that maybe the United States was a Protestant experiment, of a place fleeing religious persecution to come here. But then that brand of religion developed its own methods of persecution as well. So
yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. If you, is that, I mean, when did your philosophies stray away from Christianity?
Probably like most kids that are raised in that kind of environment. When you're a teenager, you just have this instinct to rebel against everything. So that was probably the genesis of it. And then, from there, there's just like, it moved from teenage rebelliousness to, I'm like learning new things and taking new perspectives into account and everything like that,
Yeah, that stuff kind of goes hand in hand, like discovering like punk and heavy metal and all that sort of stuff. And then, probably similar to the trajectory that I'm on, you start finding different books and, things like, Anton LaVey's Church of Satan and the Process Church and like all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all super interesting. I don't know if we've talked about this before, but I actually, when I went to college, I majored in religious studies. So that's all kind of in my wheelhouse. I tell a lot of people that and they're like, "Oh, you became a priest?" I'm like, no, that's seminary school. If you know me, I'm not a priest. But yeah, I think all that stuff's super interesting. Just the sociology and anthropology and the history of all these different religions and the crazy conditions that make, crazy things happen. Like I wrote a lot about witch trials in Europe and in the colonies and, the environments and beliefs that made those tragic events happen.
Yeah, that stuff's really very interesting. And one of the most fascinating aspects, I mean, because I did not formally study anything like that. Like when I went to college, I studied engineering and, which was like a very useful skill. However,
for sure,
did not have much wiggle room to take interesting supplemental classes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I probably should have taken less interesting classes, but here I am.
Well, I don't know. It's like I guess like for me, I was like, man, while I was like studying like fluid mechanics and all this stuff, I really wish that I could have taken some other things that would have been a little bit more broadening. But but I, as a novice philosopher, student of belief systems, like a lot of that stuff is independently. I read a lot about that, and like the fascinating aspect is like where all three of the major monotheistic religions kind of like how much they have in common. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the similarities, especially between Islam and Judaism. They have a lot of the same prophets and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, that's
it's also, we probably don't have time to delve super deep on it, but an interesting thing about those three monotheistic religions is they have a ton of similarities, but also they kind of differ greatly on ideas of evil and where evil comes from. That's also another thing that I wrote a lot about, like the problem of evil in different world religions. like Satan plays an entirely different role in Christianity versus Judaism versus Islam. It's pretty fascinating to look at. Maybe we'll have a podcast about that sometime.
Yeah, let's do another podcast. It's about evil. That's awesome.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, because I actually, I mean, my personal interpretation of that is more of like the sort of pagan ideology about evil, where it's kind of just another expression of the natural world, really.
Yeah.
So one of the things we talked about discussing tonight was M.R. James, who's, I would say, someone that I did not get into in my first introduction to a lot of these writers, even though he's a contemporary of you know, like Robert Chambers and Poe and all those guys, just, you know, basically.
Yeah.
You know, but he was a name that was sort of out in the periphery.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me at least. I don't know.
Like I feel like he's one of those guys that everyone that's into this kind of stuff has heard of, but not necessarily read very much of. I know I'm not as well read in M.R. James as I would like to be.
I think, like, if you're from the UK, you know, since he's he's British, and also his work has been adapted quite a bit into
right,
like BBC programming and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, the Whistle and I'll Come to You. There's like there's a film version of that I've never seen myself, but I've heard good things about it.
I think there's one adapted from Count Magnus as well.
Yeah, have you seen that?
I haven't.
Yeah, I feel like if you're British, like, you know about all this stuff, and it's just, that stuff is so hard to find or even be aware of over here in the States.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. It's kind of weird how some people make the jump and some don't across the continent.
Yeah. But the interesting thing about Count Magnus is that he's actually a historical figure.
Right. Yeah.
You know, Count Magnus de la Gardie was an actual Swedish noble, and Roback was an actual place. It's kind of a and apparently at that time, Scandinavia was kind of like a dark continent in a lot of ways to the Brits. Like, they didn't really know much about that part of the world.
Right. So it must have, you know, seemed very exotic or whatever.
Yeah, this is probably one of this one and maybe Whistle are probably like the two, you know, more well known tales by James.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. Yeah, it's.
I can't remember.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Doesn't Lovecraft mention Count Magnus in one of his essays? Because I think that's where I first was introduced to M.R. James, is through something Lovecraft said, but I could be totally wrong.
I feel like you're correct about that. I can't recall exactly where I read about it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I can't remember if it was in supernatural horror and literature or one of his other essays, but I know he was a fan.
Yeah. But you know, this particular story, you know, it sort of ties in the you know, vampire fiction, you know, ghosts, things like that, you know, the undead. And
and demonic pacts. I feel like there's a little bit of everything just in this one figure.
Yeah. You know, and you know, James is mostly known for ghost stories, so this one sticks out a little bit more as having, you know, that kind of that other sort of vibe to it. And also, I always got this sense that there was like kind of not a werewolf, but like some kind of unknown creature in this, you know.
Yeah.
You know, they refer to this thing called the Black Pilgrimage, and they never really tell you exactly what it is, but he brings something back with him.
Right. And then I guess that ends up being the little figure that shows up in the engraving. And then, you know, that the narrator or the main protagonist, I guess, is kind of haunted by later. Is that guy, the little figure in Count Magnus.
Yeah. So this would be a good adaptation to see as a film. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
I think so.
And I'm going to have to seek this out for sure,
Yeah.
and try to get this thing. But what I like about it is that it ties into vampire fiction as well as like this demonic possession sort of stuff.
Right.
And right now is a good time to really be into vampire movies. You know what I mean? Because we have this this other film that's going to be popping up soon. That the last voyage of the Demeter.
Yeah.
And just recently, I rewatched the original Nosferatu and the late '70s Werner Herzog remake.
Yeah.
Have you seen those?
Both great. Yeah, both great films.
Yeah. So the Demeter opens up this weekend, so I'm hoping that
I'm hoping to make it out and catch that. That's also my favorite chapter from Dracula. I think it's like chapter 7 or something. But when the ship comes on shore, everything, it's just, I feel like it's the most well written, has the most picturesque language.
Yeah, the captain's log version, entries like that sort of thing. Yeah. I have to say, my unpopular opinion about the Dracula novel is that great story, not very well written for the most part.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Like I said, I do really like chapter 7. I think the language is really, really great, but there are a lot of problems with the writing, I think. And I get annoyed every time I read it and have to read Van Helsing's dialect.
Yeah.
And just, the way it's structured is kind of weird, and there's weird stuff here and there. But yeah, cool story.
I think that Frankenstein is, since we're, those two are classic 1800s, horror fiction, gothic fiction. Much better written, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of has this fast moving, well edited, I know there's like the 1818 version and then the later version.
Yeah.
And I think I prefer the 1818 one better.
Right.
And,
I definitely think that Dracula is kind of a cumbersome read.
It's a slog, man. Like I read it once when I was a kid, and then I thought it was cool because it was like all new. There was like a certain novelty to reading it, especially after watching the movies, and then it's way different to read it, and the novelty of it wore off over the years. And I just picked up another edition of it a couple of years ago, which I reread it, and I was like, man, this is like a slog to get through.
It kind of is.
And like you were saying, the dialect, Van Helsing's dialect, is very difficult. And there's I just heard about this podcast that they're doing audio versions of Dracula, but they're cleaning up the more problematic parts of the text, which
interesting.
I don't know how I feel about that, honestly. I mean, yes, the book was written like over 100 years ago, and obviously the world has changed. There's been different points of view. People are more worldly, and more sensitive to diversity. However, to modify the source material like that,
I think you lose something.
Yes, exactly.
In being able to understand, the characters, not only Dracula, but the motivations of everyone in the story. So I don't know. It's like if you do something like that, then that's something that you have to be cognizant of.
Yeah, because part of me is like, well, if you have such a problem with the material, why do the project?
Right. Yeah.
If the material is problematic to you, then you should stay away from it, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know. At first I was like interested in checking it out, and then the producers of it were guests on another podcast that I listened to, and they were describing that process that they were going through, and I was just like, I respect your point of view on that. However, it's not really for me, and I question why you would want to take something like that on.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't feel like that's really something that I would be interested in.
No, definitely
like you said, if you want to, if you have such a problem with something that you have to totally dismantle it and change everything to that extent, it's like, well, why aren't you just? It seems like if you don't like it, why are you spending your time with it? Almost.
Yeah, totally. With the lyrical writing for the All Hell stuff, like what basically what are your inspirations when it comes to that sort of stuff?
A lot of weird fiction and also mythology and just occult and religious texts. A little bit of everything swirled together.
Yeah, I was picking up on that. Especially being a fan of the band as well.
Right. Yeah. The latest EP is kind of a, I don't know. The first three songs are connected, and the last three songs are re-recorded versions of really old songs off the first album. But the first three are kind of tied together with this, slightly apocalyptic vampire cult nonsense going on.
Now, do you draw from the sort of mythology of vampires, or you sort of extrapolate that and come up with your own ideas?
Both, for sure.
Well, I know that you guys are also big Misfits fans, and have you had a chance to see these new Misfit shows at all?
I did. So I went and saw the second one they ever did at Riot Fest in 2016, I think it was. And then just actually a few weeks ago, maybe, I don't know, I guess it's like a month and a half ago now, I made it down to the show they did in Tampa. All Hell actually had a show up in Georgia the night before, and I kind of just on a whim was like, I'm halfway down there. There's still tickets. I'm going to go see the Misfits. It was a good time.
Yeah, I sort of like the first wave of shows that they did, I missed those.
Yeah.
I think there was a conflict with some touring that we had possibly.
Right.
And then right earlier this year they announced some shows up here in the Northeast in New Jersey, and
right.
I was like, man, this might be really one of the last times I get a chance to see Danzig perform this material.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, this guy's getting up there in age. Who knows how long they're going to be doing this? I'm a massive Danzig fan, so I decided to bite the bullets. I got a bunch of two tickets, and we went.
Nice.
Had a great time. And
is that the Newark show?
Yeah, Newark, man. And
cool. That was like the weekend after the Tampa show, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I think you guys might have had better support on that show. I think, did Megadeth play that show?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, we didn't have anything like that up here.
Gotcha.
I'm not going to slander the bands that went on before them, but it was not my cup of tea, man. And it was like, it's
Fair
like we got there, and the funny thing about the Prudential Center in Newark is that, you and I probably aren't used to going to places like this. It's like, this like sports complex, there's all these different nooks and restaurants and places you can hang out at. Yeah. So I remember we got there, we ran into some friends, and it was like a whole other social experience before the Misfits actually went on. And then once we heard the sound check, just doing the line check before they went on, I'm like, oh damn, we better get our seats right now.
Yeah.
But not for nothing. I went not to see Doyle, and Jerry Only. I went to see Glenn and Dave Lombardo play those songs.
Right.
They had this dude AC Slade on stage.
Right. Playing like secret second guitar.
Dude, that was like the fucking. We had like fairly good seats. We were able to see the stage. We weren't. It was like this kind of date night thing for me. So we, wanted to have seats and be comfortable and all that. So the stage is like super dark, and I'm like, wait, I see some guy like standing next to the drum riser, like all like in the shadows and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Like he wasn't like up front, And I was like,
kind of a weird situation.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, don't look over there. There's a guy playing all the songs.
Yeah.
And it was like, I don't know that I knew what I was in for. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
And I had a great time. I didn't care. But one of the things I learned about, and this is because my girlfriend is a Jersey native, and she knows a lot about the kind of obscure stuff that goes on out here. Like there's tons of bands that, and because I spent most of my life living in New York on the other side of the river, a lot of these bands like never seem to make it over into the city, where they would play locally, but they would have like a massive following like in New Jersey.
Yeah, just across the river.
Yeah. And that's where that Mike Hideous guy came from, who was like never recorded with the Misfits and only toured with them briefly. But up here,
I was like for some South America shows, right?
Yeah. So he's kind of like this like legend in some ways, especially in the greater metropolitan area up here.
Right.
So I learned about him that weekend, and I was like, wow, that's like it's like a local like mythological figure. And then I discovered like his band, Empire Hideous. And it's like this very obscure story that I found completely fascinating. Are you familiar with this guy at all?
I'm a little bit familiar, not super familiar. I do know, like I basically know the things that you just said. I know, he was kind of associated with the Misfits, and he did that South American tour, I guess, when either Graves couldn't do it or it was temporarily fired from the band. I don't know. It depends on who you ask about that, I think. And then there were like rumors that maybe he was going to be the new vocalist, but I guess that didn't pan out. And then I don't know. I know I've listened to some of his Empire Hideous stuff, and you had mentioned that autobiography, which I haven't read, but I do remember seeing something about it. And I think they were making a documentary also, but I think there was maybe some drama with that, and I don't know.
Yeah, the my girlfriend has like the first press of the biography, but there's been like an expanded edition that just came out in the last maybe year or so. So I ordered that one, and I'm in the middle of reading that as well. And it's I don't know, I'm fascinated by it. It's like one of those like things that you just, for me personally, I find these like obscure like local guys, and I just get deep into it. Like in the area of New York where I grew up, there's a guy named Richie Scarlett who I don't even know what happened to this dude, but he was like a guy when I was a kid that he was like a household name if you were into like metal, and thrash and stuff like that. But he was like a little bit older. He was from like a different era. He was more like a late 70s guy that got sucked into like this weird punk metal crossover kind of thing.
Yeah.
And like I think he played in Ace Frehley's band for a while. He played with Joan Jett, like all these types of people. You know what I mean? He was like this he had his own thing going on. It's called like Richie Scarlett and the Seducers was one band that he had, and then, but it was like all of that sort of really raw, heavy metal with like a weird punk edge to it, And I if I could find this stuff, on MP3, I have 1 7-inch that this guy made, and I'll try to find maybe YouTube videos or something. I'll send it to you. I think you might dig it actually.
Yeah. Definitely be down to check it out.
But I feel like Mike Hideous falls into that realm of like known by a very small subset of people, but relatively obscure. And even, Mike Hideous, even the fact that he was in the Misfits, is only performed live with them,
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely know what you mean, though, with these weird kind of like regional mythical characters.
Yeah, it's like a they're like folk heroes in a way,
Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar up in Boston, closer to Boston, Salem area. I don't know if you know Lou Miami at all.
I've seen that name in print, but I don't know anything about it though. Yeah.
Yeah, he's was another one of those like, regional mythical guys. I'll have to send you some of his stuff. It's pretty cool. I mean, it's a little more, punk and new wavy, but I know you're into a lot of that stuff too.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely. I have a pretty wide, like palette when it comes to music. Yeah. So as far as the EP and all that, if you want to let everyone know like where they can, download it or buy it or buy the physical copy or stream it or that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. It's called All Hail the Night. It's 3 brand new songs and 3 songs of our first full length re-recorded. Sound a lot closer to how we sound live as opposed to how we sounded 9 years ago. It's on Spotify and all the streaming platforms, and if you want to buy a physical copy, it's allhell.bandcamp.com is the best place to do it.
Right on. And what about like social links and all that sort of stuff where people can find you guys on like all the channels?
Instagram at allhellband, facebook.com/allhellband.
That's pretty much it. Are you on like Threads or fucking Twitter or anything like that? Or
no,
X is, I think it's called X now.
Yeah, we used to have a Twitter page, but we kind of lost interest. Yeah. Haven't used it in several years.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, man.
And likewise, why neither I nor the band have made a Threads account, especially since it's mostly text based, and I don't feel like generating a bunch of content that I don't even own.
Right.
Show wise, we got a few little fests coming up.
Oh, it's here.
September 30th, we're playing in Lexington, Kentucky at the Up the Pups Fest, which is a animal benefit show. Some friends of ours organize every year up in Lexington, so we're going to be doing that. October 21st, we're playing the Shadow Woods Metal Fest reunion in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. That one should be pretty cool. I think Panopticon is headlining.
Right on.
And there's a lot of killer bands on that one. November 10th, we're playing Steel and Stone Festival in Asheville. There's a lot of cool traditional metal bands on that one. And then still in the works, but we'll have some tour dates around that one in November and then later in the month and a few in December as well. But hopefully we'll have those announced.
Any dates up here?
I'm not sure yet. We're working on it. If we don't make it north this year, then definitely in the spring, but hopefully by the end of the year.
Shadow Woods, man. Did they bring that back? Is that what it is?
So this one is more, I guess it's called Shadow Woods Reunion. I think it's a bunch of bands that have played before. We played in 2017. We were supposed to play in 2018, but there was a hurricane that affected some of our travel and we didn't make that one. But yeah, this is October 20th and 21st. It's a 2-day thing. I think there's like 6 or 7 bands each day. But yeah, it's all bands that have played the fest before.
Yeah, we played that a couple times actually back in the day.
Oh yeah,
when it was I think it was in Maryland originally.
Yeah, it was. I think it was just getting too hard to get the camp maybe that they used to have it at, but I don't know.
Yeah, there was definitely some logistical problems with that. You know what I mean? Like
lighting
things the right way, and just after a while, you know, you're just standing around and just in total darkness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And which is
for
cool,
sure.
you know, but it's like,
Yeah.
it was just kind of hard to manage it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely cool though, and the promoter who does it is great. Love her.
Yeah. Yeah. Mary, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. She's great. I haven't seen her in a while, but she's awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Actually, she was a guest on this podcast several years ago.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We go back several years. So
Awesome.
yeah. Well, it was great talking to you, man. And yeah, I'm gonna keep my eyes out.
Good to talk to you too.
Want to check you guys out when you come up here this time around.
Yeah, for sure. I'll let you know.
All right, man. Have a good night.
All right. Thanks for having me, dude.
You got it.
See ya.
Bye.
Let the night run red.